I fractured my knee. I got a torn ACL, a tear in my meniscus. I am not going anywhere. Got the walker right here, my hefty walker, and this chair, and that bed, and that TV are pretty much my life. It has been for the past 4 weeks. So I've been going stir crazy, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do a couple videos. It is January 30th, 2025. And this video I have thought about for a long, long time because this is going to be a rant video. This video is basically going to be bands at the end of their career who have screwed over original members. Now, I'm going to stop everyone right here because some of the people I'm going to be talking about, you're going to say, well, they weren't an original member. For example, I'm going to talk about Michael Anthony. Mark Stone, yes, was the original bass player in Van Halen. I'm double checking on the internet here. I'm going to talk about Mick Mars. And what is the guy's name? Pulling up here, Odin. What was that guy's name that Mick fired? They basically had Mick fired. Yeah, I think his name was Odin. Could be wrong. All right. You know what? We're not going to split hairs though. These guys have been with the band since before their first album. So technically, maybe not the most original member, but been with them pretty much from the start. I want to talk, and I know, yeah. Oh no, Odin was a vocalist. Little name, blah 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 blah. Singer and lead vocalist. Yeah, Odin was a vocalist. There was Robin Moore. I guess was the guy that Mick eventually fired. So yeah. So okay, Robin Moore was the original guitar player in Motley Crue for a week, 2 weeks, whatever. Maybe not even. But these guys were the original members. If you wanna split hairs in the comments, God bless. But what we're seeing is a trend of bands as they're in their sunset years, as they're in the final, the final stretch of their career, and they're picking on. And I have 5 here that I'm going to focus on. I know there are a ton more, but these are 5 from my favorite bands. And I could do this, and this could be a 7-hour video. But in their sunset years, and as I look at this, yeah, man, there's this trend of picking the weakest link in the band and either saying we're going to diminish your part, you're going to take less money, or just outright throwing them out so they can have somebody new come in as a hired gun. And again, they're not splitting the profits of the band 4 or 5 ways. Now they're only splitting it 3 ways. If there were 4 people in the band, 4 ways. If there was 5 people in the band, and then you're paying this person, this hired gun, per show or whatever it may be. And I'll start off with Mick Mars since I talked about Motley Crue. And everything Mick's gone through, where they've pushed him out of the band. They tried to give him, the band was 25% each. They tried to say, we're going to push you out of the band and give you 5%. Now, Mick, he deals with this horrible disease. I'm not even going to try to say it, but it's the curvature of the spine, or the fusing of the spine. I cannot even imagine how painful this is for this man. He has been going through this, I believe, since the 60s or 70s, and this just getting progressively worse. He said that it's slowly been turning him into a statue. This is just hell. And it seems like it's a pretty rare disease. I'm not an expert. I'm going by the interviews that I've seen where Mick talks about this, or his bandmates talk about this all through Motley Crue. So I know nothing else beyond Motley Crue. But it doesn't seem like this is pretty rare. So it doesn't seem like there's, this is obviously not given the research that cancer or, leukemia or something like that is given. So I don't know if the treatment has changed much over the past 40, 50 years for this poor man. But he did say after the last tour he was going to be done with touring. I think that's where they all agree on. But he was still going to be a member of the band and possibly select shows, like if they played in LA or maybe New York or Chicago or whatever it may be, he would get on stage for some or all of the show. I don't know. But he was still going to be an active member as far as new music as well. Well, and it sounds like that was something that was discussed and kind of agreed upon. After the last tour ended with Mick, the other three kicked him out and said, basically, you're done. We'll give you 5% of everything going forward. Now we got John Five in. I'm not a big John Five fan, not because I don't like the guy. I don't know enough about him. But I got to give John credit, man. He has been nothing but a class act during this entire thing. He has never badmouthed Mick. He has only spoken highly of Mick. And, he has really stayed out of it. Tommy, Vince, I think Vince cares. I think Vince shows up. He phones in his performance, gets his paycheck and hightails it back to Nashville. This is Tommy and Nikki. And it really sucks because I loved those two as a kid. I worshipped Tommy and Nikki. And it's just, and Tommy even has a Mick Mars tattoo. And it really seemed like they were the ones that are the spearheading this attack on Mick and to throw him out of the band. Now, you go back decades, and Jake E. Lee, and I always kind of took things that Jake said with a grain of salt because, it sounded like some of the stories he said were a little bit embellished, but Jake said that is going as far back as the Bark of the Moon tour. Tommy and Nikki had talked to Jake, pulled him aside and said, we want to get rid of Mick and we want you to come in. And Jake was like, and surprisingly, even after how Ozzy and Sharon had screwed Jake out of the royalties for Bark of the Moon, Jake stayed loyal to Ozzy, possibly saying, it was a bigger payday. Motley Crue only had at that point 2 albums under their belt. But he said, no, I'm going to stick with Ozzy. That story had been floating around for a while, and I always kind of took it with a grain of salt because Jake does tell some stories, and some of them sound a little bit embellished. But then Bob Daisley comes forward about a year ago, maybe even a little longer, and says, no, that's true. That's true. They actually talked to me about it as well. And I said, hey, you got a good thing going. And Mick, contributes. And if you look at Dr. Feelgood, Mick contributed a lot to that album, which I don't think is their best, but is their most successful. Stick with what you got. And there have been stories that have popped up where they have talked about trying to get Mick out and somebody else in. Somebody who's more hip and young and cool. And Mick is all those things. He's outclassed all those other 3 guys, in my opinion. And Mick is the nice one. This goes back to me saying, this is where they find the weakest link. Mick is nice. He is laid back. He tells a story very bluntly when Scott Humphrey was, I believe it was the Generation Garbage album. Scott Humphrey was trying to push Nikki to get Mick thrown out of the band, and it seemed like it was getting close to it. John Corabi has said that there was a point where there were 2 guitarists. Thought, when Vince first came back, there would be 2 guitarists, and thought process was Mick was going to be slowly pushed out of the band. So they've kind of always had a target on Mick, but they've really screwed him over, man. I think he would have been. Mick seems like a pretty down to earth guy. I have a funny story about Mick. I may have said it in a prior video. They picked him. They picked the nice guy, the guy who usually went along with everything and could kind of be walked on, and they've screwed him over. And this is an ongoing thing. So, and the stuff Tommy and Nikki have released, Dogs of War and Cancel, and this stuff's garbage. And what do you do? Why do you cover a Madonna song for the Dirt and then Beastie Boys? This is new music. It's terrible. What they're doing is terrible. And Mick has flat out said he was the only one playing live during the shows, and there are tapes that are showing that he's right. So he may end up having the last laugh on this. But yeah, there's Motley picking on, screwing over McMyers. Funny story I have, and I don't know if this is true. This is secondhand. So was that a girl I worked with years ago in insurance said that she worked for a credit card company. I'm not going to say who. But she had to call Mick a couple times because there were, and I guess does make sense because he loves exotic animals, and it kept triggering some alerts because he was buying this these exotic animals, or going to this exotic animal store, I don't know, whatever it was, and it kept on triggering an alert thinking the card was stolen. And she would call Mick, and she said she called him a few times, just got to the point where she was calling him and go, "Hey, Mick, it's so," I'm not going to say who she is. "It's so-and-so, and, we got the alert again. I just need to know you bought this, I don't know, whatever it was, $10,000 parakeet or parrot." "No, I did. She would talk. She said he was the nicest guy. So, yeah, there's the one guy getting screwed over by Motley Crue. Let's talk about another guy that's getting screwed over. Has been getting screwed over. Oh, I could go down a whole rabbit hole with this one. Michael Anthony from Van Halen. Yes, I know he wasn't the original bass player, but he is in all intents and purposes. Now, Mike has gotten screwed over the years. So this is not just at the end of the career. Mike has gotten screwed over, and I know this is a touchy subject because Ed has passed away. And I will tell you, I loved Ed as a kid, man. I put him above Randy Rhoads, and you guys should know, maybe, from seeing my videos. I named my kid Randy after Randy Rhoads. So Randy's number one for me now in guitar players, but as a kid, it was Eddie, then Randy. But God, did Eddie screw him over. Eddie and the guys. First off, with the whole Beck, I didn't know this till about a year ago. I don't know how I didn't know this, that they, on the 1984 tour, they're having dinner, and they all just start screaming and hollering at Mike, saying, "You're done with royalties. You're not getting any future songwriting royalties, and going forward, you're not getting any back royalties from the back catalog." And Mike, again, being the nice guy, Mike's always been the class act. Okay, fine. There's that. There is when they had that reunion tour with Sammy, Mike had to sign away all his rights to everything, his rights to Van Halen, the Van Halen name, to everything, and he was basically paid as a day player, as a hired gun. They're forward. The whole thing where Eddie said that he had to take a video camera to show Mike how to play notes, which we all know is not true. That was all a lie. And then, of course, bringing Wolfgang in. I could do a whole other video on Wolfgang, and I'm going to be in that whole situation, but it was a screw over. I will, again, this is extremely touchy for many reasons. The first one is Ed has passed away. The second one is I have all the love and respect in the world for Wolfgang Van Halen and Valerie Bertinelli. There is a behind the music with Wolfgang Van Halen. And I'll tell you, I was tearing up. This kid, and I know he's 30 years old. I'm 50. So he's still a kid. He's a kid to me. But this kid and Valerie, but Valerie, God bless that woman, has been so honest with things. And she said she brought on a lot of the things that poor guy had to go through. But he really does talk about how it was a difficult childhood. It was a very difficult childhood at times. It was also a glorious childhood, and he basically says that when it came to his father, it was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and it was basically if his father was sober, he was not even Dr. Jekyll, Dr. Wonderful. And there's so many fan stories of people saying how great Eddie was sober. Drunk, completely different story. I do firmly believe, though, the second Wolfgang was born, Mike's days were over with. You hear the story, you go back to the 1984 era where they say they were trying to get Billy Sheehan. And Billy Sheehan's a good bass player, and I know a lot of people think he's one of the best. Not a fan. Take Michael Anthony over that guy any day. So Mike kind of had a target on his back, but I do firmly believe the second Wolfgang was born, and especially when he showed musical prowess, Mike was done. Eddie knew that Wolfgang was going to be in his band, and he's not going to kick his brother out. Whether it would have been at that point in time Sam or Dave, can't get rid of either one of them. Who are you going to get rid of? Mike. Wolfgang was an heir apparent. There was no way he was not going to be in Van Halen, and there was no way that Mike was not going to be the one that was thrown out. I know that there's a lot of back and forth that there was bad blood between the Van Halens and Mike because Mike stayed friends with Sammy. Yes, I think that added to things and it made it easier for Eddie, but I firmly believe, especially with that horrible Van Halen 3 album that Mike was almost not on, Eddie was preparing Wolfie to take that spot. Mike has been nothing but a class act. That guy could write a Van Halen book. And the recording of this Brothers, Alex's book came out a couple months ago. I haven't read it yet, so I'm not really going to talk about it. Mike could write My Life in Van Halen book. Honestly, I think that would go to #1 and stay there for weeks if Mike wanted to dish some dirt. But, man, you talk about an original member that has just gotten screwed. And, yeah, this is one really at the end of their career. But for all intents and purposes, it kind of was for Van Halen because, truthfully, between Balance, where they were still a solidified band, and then the chaos that ensued after all that between Sharon and Roth coming back for 15 minutes for the Greatest Hits album, and then Hagar coming back for the tour, and then Roth coming back. It really, you had what? Balance came out in 95, something like that. And Eddie died, it's 2025. What, Eddie died 3 years ago? I mean, you could have squashed all that time into 3-4 years. So, yeah, it really kind of did happen at the end of their career. But Michael Anthony got royally, royally, royally screwed throughout the entire career of Van Halen. And sadly, it never got addressed or got fixed. Now, Mike did say that he was talking to Eddie about a reunion with the classic lineup. And again, this is why I will never dish on Wolfie. Wolfie was pretty much the guy that said, Dad, I love you. I loved being part of this band. I loved being in Van Halen. This was great. You need to get Mike back. I'm going to go do my thing. I'll do stuff with you. I would do, if Eddie was still alive and, was alive for the next 30 years, I'm sure we'd see offshoots of things between the two of them, left and right. Maybe, Wolfie on Van Halen albums here and there. But Wolf really was instrumental in saying, Dad, this was a fun version of Van Halen. The world needs Van Halen back, though. The next one, man, this goes under the radar way too much. Joey Kramer from Aerosmith. And if you ever saw the making of Pump, it's a great video. I had it on VHS. It's long since gone. Haven't seen it since the 90s. But I do remember him, Steven Tyler. Steven Tyler has I want to say the word terrorized Joey Kramer, I think, since the inception of the band. Joey has told stories that, Steven will attack his drumming because Steven is a drummer and Steven is just perfect at everything. That, on that Pump video, Steven does attack Joey. And on the VH1 Candy Music from 30 years ago, whatever it was, Joey says Steven's the twitch in his eye. Steven is really he's treated Joey like garbage. Now, at the end of Aerosmith, this really was at the end of the career, they kicked Joey out, and said he can't play. Now, part of that's probably true. Being a drummer is the hardest part of the band. Physically, it is the hardest part of the band. We just had Nico McBrain retire from Iron Maiden. That kills me. But he did it with style. He did it with class. And the band and Iron Maiden stuck by their bandmate. Shows the difference between them and a band like Aerosmith. And I believe it's mainly Steven Tyler that wanted to push Joey Kramer out for money. This kind of goes back to a Motley Crue thing. I think at that point, there may have been times where they want to throw Mick out because he wasn't as cool and as young and as good looking. But now this is all money. Joey Kramer, same thing with Aerosmith. This is just money. All about splitting this from 4 ways or 5 ways to 4 ways. There's a video where they wouldn't even let Joey into a rehearsal studio. It's on YouTube. You can find it. Security, is stopping him from going in. This is terrible. This was your brother since the late 60s, early 70s. This is how you're going to treat this guy? Throw him out? But I guess in a way, Joey kind of has the last laugh because, and I don't wish anything bad on anyone, but Steven's vocal damage, I guess, has stopped Aerosmith from doing anything. They're going to do one, I don't know, now they're talking about maybe doing 1 or 2 shows, whatnot, but this was totally this was a money grab. And you know what? And Joe Perry probably had a decent say in it too, and I like these guys. Sorry if you hear that crackling. My knee brace was kind of rubbing against the chair. The Velcro was coming off. I love these guys, but Tom Hamilton and Brad Whitford, if either you were in on it or you sat off to the sidelines, because I'm going to tell you right now, those two could have easily said, Steven, Joe, yeah, you're the 2 biggest names in Aerosmith, but you're not Aerosmith. Go try to do this with us walking off with Joey. It's all 5 of us, or it's just you 2 and 3 other dimwits, and you look and see how well Rockin' a Hard Place sold and how well that went off. But I think they just sat off to the side. I don't know if those 2 were as big a part of it as just sitting off to the side with their heads in the sand. Poor Joey Kramer, man. That band either way was on it. They were on their Riva Dirt Chief for the 5th time tour. They were saying goodbye, and they couldn't let the man say goodbye. Even if Joey couldn't play a whole set, he could have come out and played 3-4 songs, But no, money. So Joey Kramer, man, makes this list of being screwed over. Another one that's going to be a weird. This is not as much heavy metal, but I've talked about this band I love, Journey and Ross Valory. Now, Ross Valory has gotten screwed over now he is an original member. Ross Valory has more originality as far as longevity in that band than Steve Perry, and Jonathan Cain. And he's gotten screwed over twice. Steve Perry threw him and Steve Smith out. And I'm not putting Steve Smith in here because he is not an original member. Ainsley Dunbar was. But Perry throws him out before Raves on Radio or during the sessions. And then a couple years ago, there's a lawsuit where Ross Valory and Steve Smith sue to get control of the name or part of Journey, something, or maybe it was the name, from Jonathan Cain and Neil Sean, who those 2 can't stand each other anyway. So this is really a cluster. But again, over money. They knew that Ross Valory knew that those 2, that Jonathan and Neil, were trying to get the lion's share of everything. And in my view, Ross was doing everything he could to protect himself. No, Ross doesn't have the writing credits that those 2 do, or Perry has on the songs. But my God, guy was here from day one. Ross Valory was really instrumental in the sound of Journey, especially on those everything from the first Journey album. And I'm not a big fan of those first 3 Journey albums. I think I did a ranking a while back. Those are always at the bottom of my list. But when you start talking about Infinity, when you start talking about Departure and Evolution, oh my God, those albums are unbelievable. And Ross had a big stake in that. And yes, he gets screwed. Again, Journey, how much longer is Journey going to be around? So yeah, I'd say this is towards the end of their career. And I'm sure that Neil, and now that we see that Neil and Jonathan was sued Neil because I guess Neil's wife is putting thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on an American Express Black Card. Hey, if my wife is going to spend that much money, I guess I need to get rid of somebody who's making a lot of money or try to screw them over. So poor Ross has gotten screwed over twice now by Journey. And I'm definitely Team Ross. Now, the big one, man. I could do a 27-hour video on this. Bill Ward. You talk about Mick Mars. you talk about Michael Anthony. Joey Kramer and Ross Valerie, I'm sure they have their fan base. But Mick, Mike, and Bill Ward are probably, in their respective bands, the band members that are loved the most. Now, does that mean they're the most popular? No. But when it comes to the fans and who we care about, it's them. Why? Because Mick Mars, Michael Anthony, and Bill Ward have been the ones that have been extremely accessible. They have been the ones that don't spit on the fans. They're the ones that will stand outside a venue, take pictures, sign things, and not necessarily, and I know they've done it because it's part of the package, but it doesn't always have to be a $500 meet and greet. You can, they are the type of guys that if you saw them in Walmart, they would stop and not only take a picture, but by account, talk to you for a good amount of time. That's why Bill Ward, the other Mick and Mike as well, but Bill Ward is so beloved in the Sabbath community. And Sharon, all right, because of course she gets you. Allegedly, I have no evidence to say it was her. But most likely Sharon was the one that said, weakest link, nicest guy, the guy they have always played pranks on, the guys they have always screwed over. Let's throw Bill Ward out of the band, or not throw him out of the band. Let's give him an unsignable contract. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And I love you, Tony Iommi. I absolutely do. Do not give us this load of bullshit that you didn't know was going on. Same thing with Geezer, but we come to find out later with Geezer's book that he was pretty much a hired gun too. You could have stopped it, Tony. You flat out could have said, if Bill Ward is not in this band, Tony Iommi's not in this band. Geezer would have said, I'm not in this band. And that would have been the end of it. You saw a paycheck. You saw a big, I love you, Tony, but man, you let me down and you let a lot of people down because Ozzy doesn't know what planet he's on. And this is, this is before his health has gone down. And he does whatever Sharon tells him to do. Geezer said that. Tony, you could have stopped it. And Bill, you and Bill were in Mythology together. You two were brothers. And I will point out, you didn't want to fire Ozzy back in 79, and you coerced Bill into doing it. And Bill didn't want to do it. But to screw this guy over, that should have been a 4-way split. But again, now it came out many, many years ago that Ozzy and Tony Iommi own Black Sabbath's name and I guess the rights to it. Geezer, they can't tour without Geezer's okay. I did read Geezer's book. I think there's some other kind of big stipulation that Geezer has a say in something. But basically he's hired. He's not, he is not an equal partner, nor would Bill have been. If anything, if anyone should have owned the name, it should have been Tony, because Tony kept the band going. Again, this is where I'll show my love for Tony. When everybody else wrote off Black Sabbath, Tony kept it going. So I would have been fine if Tony Iommi was the only sole, the only sole legal member of Black Sabbath. But of course, Sharon wouldn't let Ozzy do anything unless he owned half of it. So Sharon I allegedly believe Sharon made the decision that screw Bill. He's nothing. He'll do what we tell him to do. Bill will play for whatever we decide to give him, and he'll show up and, man, I love you, Bill. You did not let it happen. And man, you could have, and Bill is such a good person. I know this wore on him. I know that he said, I should do this for the fans. I'll take the hit and do it. But he didn't. He did not. He had been made an ass out of by that band, whether again painting him or setting him on fire or whatever. He finally stood up for himself, and I'm so glad. I hate that we didn't get to see Black Sabbath, because I saw the Black Sabbath tour with Tony Kluftos, guy from Ozzy's band. Good guy, great drummer. He's a good great drummer. And again, a class act, always very respectful of Bill. Tommy Kluftos. I'm sorry I'm saying your name wrong, I'm sure. But Tommy's always been a class act. But boy, did they screw over Bill Ward. The nicest, most caring guy in the world. Just a lovable. Every story you ever hear about Bill is how great he is. And the greedy troll just, oh. And you know what? I'm sick and tired of everybody making excuses for Ozzy. Oh, he just does what Sharon wants him to do. No, screw you, Ozzy. You could have said it too. Don't sit there and hide behind her skirt. You had enough of a backbone to cheat on her. Remember the hairdresser and 1,000 of other times I'm sure happened during the road. And Sharon said that you've cheated on the road. On the road. You had the backbone to do some stuff, right? You could have defended your friend. And you could have too, geezer. So I'm throwing it at all three of them. Because all it would have taken was one other person to say, I'm not doing it without Bill, and it would have been over. No, people would not have wanted to see Black Sabbath, just Geezer and Tony, or Ozzy and Geezer. We all know people would not want to pay to see Black Sabbath. Let's be honest, Cross Purposes tour with just Tony and Geezer. You needed to have at least 3 of the original members. And Sharon picked the weakest link, screwed him over, and did not expect him to have a backbone. So, yes, Bill. I am so proud of you, Bill. And now they're saying, oh, we want to have a last concert with Bill, and it has to be with Bill. We won't do it without Bill. Then you know what? The 3 of you, every penny, if it happens, every penny you're going to make, give every cent to Bill. All right. And yes, maybe it's possible, again, like Joey Kramer, it's very possible Bill couldn't do a whole set. The fans would be fine seeing him for 3-4 songs. You know what? But Bill said he could. So I don't know. I also do think Ozzy's talking about doing one more solo album. I think, though, we may get a Sabbath album. Because now they're all trying to get together. Tony said he would be up to some kind of reunion. Geezer and Ozzy are now friends again. And, they've kissed and made up. Geezer said he would do it. Ozzy wants to do it before he can't do it anymore, which I understand. Look. Ordinary Man and Patient Number 9 are an extraordinarily far cry from Blizzard Diary. Ordinary Man and Patient Number 9 are a far cry from Screamin'. I love that album. There's some songs I think suck off that album, but I really like Scream. I don't think we need another Ozzy solo album. One more Sabbath album. You could do it. You did the first album in 12 hours. You did Paranoid in 2 weeks. You can do a quick album. Tony's got enough music written already. He said he's got mountains of music. Rick Rubin was a joke for 13. 13 sucked. And it was a representation of what Sabbath was like without Bill. Oh, does it make my blood boil to screw over Bill Ward? But all these guys, Mick is a great guy. Michael Anthony's a great guy. Joey Kramer's a great guy. Ross Valerie's a great guy. And Bill Ward, I love him. All right, so that's again, there's 1,000 more. I know I missed a bunch. Please put them in the comments. But these were my top 5 people, original members that got screwed over towards the end, during or towards the end of the career. Thanks for watching, guys. And again, I'm not going anywhere, so I may have some more content for you in the very near future. See you later. Bye.